Mr. Sullivan.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. I'm so good. How are you?
I just want you to know there's been a big habit change in my life since we've been doing these podcasts.
What's that?
On Sunday mornings, I used to read the New York Times, but now I talk to Dean Jackson. So you have replaced probably a 50-year habit. I do not find reading the New York Times as interesting as talking to you. So take it for what it's worth. Take it for what it's worth.
Oh, that's great. I look forward to them too. It is freezing down here, Dan. I don't know.
Yes.
I mean, I may be.
See, that's the problem. That's the problem of living where you live. Cold surprises you. See, I live in an environment where cold doesn't surprise me at all. I never get blindsided by cold, but you have disenabled yourself, and so you get caught by surprise.
That's so funny. Well, I almost couldn't wear shorts this weekend. I mean, it was almost that bad.
It's kind of demoralizing, though, isn't it?
I'm just looking on the weather, and I'm thinking about, I'm coming up on Tuesday to Toronto, so I'm going to be a little shocked, I think, when I get up there.
Yeah, but it's seasonably cold here, and we get used to it. I mean, we get about 6-7 weeks where every week it drops a little bit, and so if it went up to 50 today, we'd all be melting, So,
yeah.
But, it's about 20 Fahrenheit. It's not bad.
Well, there you go. Well, can I share with you a line of thinking that I've been having this week?
Yeah, and I'll give you a real 3-workshop report on the shifting of people from how I'm going to do something to who's going to do it, because it's been
tell me what
strategic. No, you start with yours. Start with yours because yeah.
Well, it's really a couple of things have happened, and it's a confluence of different concepts here that I've been kind of tying together. There's a new television show that's just come on, and I think, Dan, it's called Stripped is the name of the show. And basically, Stripped, yeah. And I think that basically the idea is, I haven't seen it yet, I've just seen the promotions for it, that they basically strip you naked and leave you in your house. They take every single thing out of your house and they store it half a mile away. And every day you're allowed to go and get one thing. And you start to this whole thing of thinking through, like, okay, what would be if I didn't have any of it, right? If everything was gone, what would be the one thing that I would want? And that kind of, I've been thinking about this idea in the context of a perfect day. When you think about it, that if we could wake up and almost like your immigrant concept, right? That you're essentially pushing the reset button. And I had been thinking before that, before I saw that show, this idea of the elements of a perfect life. And, one of them being I broke it down kind of into five elements that are the context for everything. And one of them is me. And so that's the core of everything. If you just strip yourself naked and that's what you got, meaning your physical body, your mind, everything that you've invested in that result called me right now is what you would be left with. And then as a default setting, we come into it that we all get 24 hours a day. So we're all, we've got, the way we talk about it now, 100 units a day, waking day for doing whatever we want. And it's really interesting to go through that thought of what would you do kind of if everything was reset, if you didn't have any of the patterns, the relationships, the obligations, the the current context that you have, like similar to what you're saying about every Sunday reading the New York Times, right? And now replacing those units with having a conversation about the joy of procrastination, and it's the implications of that, what that's meant in our lives over. Like I agree with you. I think that this is more impactful than reading anything over for that same amount of time.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. Thursday, when you come for your workshop, I have exercise. I have 3 brand new exercises, but the one that relates to what you were just talking about is called starting over. So I do a little survey first, and I say, raise your hand if you're starting over with something in your life. So it could be business or personal, and so, it varies throughout the room, and I just get a few examples. People to talk, they're going into a new market, so they're starting over in a new market. They've come out with a new product or a new process, and they're starting over. They've just hired a key person who is going to free them up, so they're getting to start over. So anyway, the whole concept is just really starting over with something. And what I say is, I said, now, what I want you to do in this new thing that you're heading towards, what capabilities do you have that you're going to take with you into this new situation? And they can write up to 5, and I give my examples. I always say what this means to me. And then the second column is, what relationships would you take forward? That you formed, and some of them are long-standing relationships, but you would take them. And number 3 is, what opportunities do you take with you? Okay. Yes. And the thing that I want to get across here is, you're always contemplating opportunities, but a lot of them are on the back burner. And this gives you a chance to, am I just wasting my time thinking about that opportunity, or I'm going into something new? Would I still take the possibility of that opportunity with me? Right. And they go through that. And I only give them 2 minutes for each column, because if you give people a time frame, then their mind works faster. Sure. Brainstorming. It's a form of brainstorming. And then I say, based on this, then are there any changes during the next 90 days that would free you up from past stuff? In other words, is there some past stuff now that you got to get clear and free from? You know what goes forward. So the question is, what stays behind, and what are you going to do about that? And, it's very fast. It takes, total actual thinking time. It certainly takes less than 1 Jackson unit. Right. I was just thinking that sounds like the 2 minutes per call. Yeah, you could do the whole exercise. Yeah, you do this whole thinking process inside of a 10-minute framework. And then they talk, and, we put them in groups of 3 or 4 people, and they each get 6 minutes to talk about it. So it's another 2.5 Jackson units. And then we come back and talk about it. And it's really amazing. It's really amazing what comes out of the conversation because, they realize that they haven't identified their their capabilities, relation. And I said, these are constant resources throughout your life. I said, these are real accomplishments. You don't lose these when you change situation. If they're really, if they're really great capabilities, relationships, and opportunities, you don't lose them. Anyway, it's fascinating because it's kind of stripping. It's got a little bit of resonance with the TV show, the stripping thing. Now, let me ask you the question about that TV show. You haven't seen it yet.
I have not.
The basic thesis. So you're naked in an empty house. Is that the
starting
point? Now, and the stuff is a half a mile away, right?
Yes.
Now, do you have to go and get it?
I think that's exactly what has to happen, yeah. So I think they leave you with, like toilet paper and whatever, some basic necessity things. But it was really an interesting thing because then I saw in one thing, people, walking down the street wrapped in a shower curtain kind of thing, going to get their stuff, bring one thing back. And I think that there is something about starting from zero. Like that's an interesting thing is starting from nothing. It's really, it kind of fits with Marie Kondo has that book, the life-changing magic of tidying up. And that's her default position is gather everything and throw it all in one pile and then pick up each piece and only keep the pieces that spark joy. So the default is that you're not deciding what to throw out. You're throwing it all out and you're deciding what to keep. Or what to bring back.
Yeah, I was just thinking I'd have to be amazingly bored with my current life to be interested in participating in that TV show.
I think you're absolutely right. But it is it did tie in with that, because there's something about that immigrant mindset, because that's essentially just because that's exactly what happens. And I think when we look at it right now in a modern day, becoming an immigrant by choice, a domestic immigrant by choice, you end up that you have the opportunity to keep what you want, because you still, everything you have, the relationships that you had, the knowledge you've built, the opportunities that you currently have right now are all things that you could choose to move forward with, or you can completely reset the deck and say, what would I really want if I really was completely free?
Yeah. The exercise that we start every 10 times workshop with, which is the moving future, that's a bit of a stripping away thing because you go back 90 days, write down everything that was great, that was a win. Then you come up to the present and you say, let's write down everything you're feeling really confident about now. There's lots of action. And then you go forward and what's really exciting about new opportunities. And what it does is it separates everything positive from everything negative. And then, I'll tell people, I said, now, after they've done this writing exercise and then they've talked to each other in groups, I said, is there anything bad there that we should have put down? And they said, no, there's nothing bad that we should put down. And I said, were you thinking about the bad things before you did the exercise? And I said, yeah, most of the things I was thinking about were the bad things. And I said, so, mission accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so awesome. So it's been received well.
Which one?
The new exercise that you were sharing.
Oh yeah, no. Half the people when we do the wraparound at the end of the day, they say half this. So I had a total of about 3 workshops. I had about 100 people in 3 workshops, and they all said, half of them, 50 of them would have said, that was the highlight of the day. And,
that's so great.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I had someone who had the biggest sale of a company that I have experienced so far in Strategic Coach. Every year there's 5 or 10 people who will sell one of their companies or sell their main company, and but this was a big number. And biggest number ever, and it had happened 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he had set the whole thing up with an impact filter, and he had it was very, very interesting because when entrepreneurs sell a company, usually there's a demand from the buyer that the entrepreneur stay on as an advisor.
Mm-hmm,
yeah, and I always ask my entrepreneur when they're doing this, would they settle for less of a price if they could get free right away?
Yeah.
In other words, let's say they're getting, let's say they're getting $10 million, part of it now, and the rest at the end of 2 years or 3 years. There's like a 3-year management contract, and I say to them, is there a number in your mind that's less than the 10 million, which you would take if you could get free tomorrow? And I said, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. I'm just suggesting it as a thinking exercise. You've already agreed to the one, or this is the one that's being offered. And I said, is there a counteroffer that would give you less money, but it would give you more freedom? And it's really fascinating because they do this thinking, and they'll come back to me. And they, well, first of all, they ask me, well, why are you asking the question? Why are you asking the question? I says, because my experience with probably somewhere close to 100 entrepreneurs since I've been coaching and Strategic Coach who have gone into a management contract, and it's the most miserable years of their life. It's absolutely the worst miserable life. So I said, if the check's big enough, are you willing to put in the 2 most miserable years of your life? Are you willing to do that if the check's big enough? And the vast majority of them go for the bigger
check,
and they always come back to me if I see them and say, you're absolutely right. I hated those 2 years. And I said, so, would there have been a lower check which would have saved you from the misery?
That's pretty wise, because I know people in that same situation, and they're kind of like, they've checked out in a way when they get the first installment, and then they're bound for the next 2 or 3 years, and the clock is ticking until they're really free. That does make a difference.
And the thing is that the buyer hates it too. The buyer hates it too, and the team that stays behind, the team that used to be the entrepreneurs, but now technically belongs to the buyer, they hate it too. So it's a lose, lose, lose. And so
it's funny that you say that, because I literally just had lunch with a friend of mine, one of my golf buddies that was in that exact situation, and he's this end of December is the final of the 3-year employment contract that he had after selling his business, and he's now completely he's completely free. But it was just he wasn't enjoying it wasn't the three most joyful years of his life.
No, no, because your life is kind of suspended,
Yeah.
Because you don't have the power. You're still showing up. You're still showing up for the game, but you don't have any power in the game because you sold it away. You sold the power away, and I've noticed that people can really lose their entrepreneurial confidence during those 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting look though too, that there's, he's 63 and he's done now, done. Not
done.
I'm gonna, done. Not like I'm gonna do something else or I'm gonna go down the thing. He's but as long as I've known him, I've known him for 12 or 14 years or something. And I would say that for at least 10 of those years, he's been, we would joke about counting his pile kind of thing. It's the way he describes it, right? Counting his pile and recounting and doing the figures and looking out, is that enough kind of thing? Because that's been on his radar for 10 years at least. And then he finally, he sold at 60 and now he's, 63 and done and done. I mean, fishing and golfing and riding out the rest of my days, not thinking about anything to do with work, done. And it's just so strange to even think that's, I told him about you, actually. It's really interesting that, here it's this whole, I told him it's just so foreign to me to think that, I can't imagine being, at a point where I'm going to be done. It's just, it's just funny, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
well,
different world.
I mean, the thing is that I'm 10 years older than he is.
That's what I told him. You got a 25-year plan.
And I'm right at the threshold of one of the of a project that is the most exciting of my life, but it also has a big whack of fear. I'm experiencing fear about that, and everything else. And I've always had, we have a book called The Laws of Lifetime Growth, but the first law of the book of Laws of Lifetime Growth is always make your future bigger than your past.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm at a point at 73. This is the it's the 43rd year of my coaching career.
Yeah.
And I see that now as just all preparation, and there's large amounts of it from a standpoint of capability, relationship, and opportunity, which I'm going to carry forward. But there's a lot that I've left behind too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I told him that at 73 years old, you're 3 years into a 25-year plan. Yeah, it was really he just couldn't get his mind around that. That you're in a 25-year plan till he's 95. That's what he was saying. With that disbelief, right? Till he's 95, and then it'll be another 25-year plan right after that.
Yeah. Well, now you've really made him miserable.
Exactly. Oh, it's so funny. Yeah. Well, this time thing. So let me go back to my testing out of the who, not how. I'm calling it the who, not how approach. Okay. Perfect.
And so at various times during the day, there would be a little planning session where somebody's planning something. And I said, what's the biggest most exciting vision of your future that you have right now? And I just want you to draw, just sketch out, something, this is what you do when you're alone and you're thinking, but every part of it, every part of this makes you feel good. You put that out in there, but it's bigger and better than what you have right now. And I and I get them, 2 or 3 minutes, and they just put down some thoughts. And I said, okay, now, what doesn't work about that? Okay. And a whole bunch of people talked, but all of them said the same thing. Well, geez, I don't really know how I would do that. How would I do that? And I said, so I said, if you wrote that down to kind of make real progress on that over the next 90 days, would you probably procrastinate on the activities that you wrote down?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And, people, hands gradually go up, sheepishly. Hands go up there. And I said, the reason is because of the word how. And I told him about Dean Jackson had introduced this whole thought to me, and quite on the week there were about 15 people who listened to the Joy of Procrastination. So they said, well, if people had been listening to that, they would have known that 5 episodes ago.
Yes, right. That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, and I says, but what if it isn't about you doing anyhow, but actually you just doing a who? That basically that everything needed to get to that is just a combination of what you already know how to do anyway, plus somebody else's new capability that would take you there. Okay.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, we got into really rich conversations, but half the people talked about at the end of the day, they talked about starting over again, but a lot of them combined with that, they realized that their starting over again is switching from a life based on them finding out how to them now finding out who, so that they would not procrastinate if there was a very capable who that could be a collaborator.
I think that I mean, if you when I say that to people, I had a Breakthrough Blueprint event here in Orlando this week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I had 12 people here.
Was it cold there? Was it cold
there?
No,
it was absolutely beautiful. It was beautiful. It just turned cold this weekend. But up till then, it's been, the perfect Florida weather,
Yeah.
So one of the things that I always have people when they're describing, like if anything could happen, what would that look like? And when I let a few people kind of share that with me, but then I point out that what's happening is that we're filtering or baffling our ambition by the logistics of what we perceive that would take to make it happen.
Yes.
And so we limit our vision because we don't know how, or we know how, but we think that's going to be a lot of work that I'm going to have to do. So they limit it to, they cut it down. And it's really, it's interesting to see because it's easy for people to have bigger ambition and see a bigger vision for other people in the room because they're not filtering it through their logistics goggles or the backstory or their limited understanding of how they're actually going to make something happen.
Yeah,
it's pretty.
I'm putting some thoughts here together with the story that you told me about the man who's just completing his 3-year management contract, and I'm thinking through, and I don't know this because you don't know the internal disposition of anyone else, but it was almost like, let me just walk this through and then we'll come back and take a look at it. But the selling of this company was actually finding a who. It was actually finding a who. Okay.
Right. Who's going to get me out from under this? That's probably the way he was thinking about it. Right.
Yeah. And so he did it, but it left him done.
Yes.
And that's the problem that I see with that solution. I don't want to be done.
Right.
And so on the one hand, there's a who, and so, there's a day, in the near future when he wakes up and he truly is done. But, but then what? And I'm looking at it strictly from an entrepreneurial standpoint here. The fate that's worse than death is for an entrepreneur in my world to be done.
Right.
First of all, I'll kick them out. That's the big thing. I can't. Our coach bouncers will take them out the back door.
No observers. There's no observers allowed. Yeah.
No, and give them a little bit of a working over, before they slam the door. But the whole point here is I understand why someone would do this, and so I'll go to the person who had the big sale, and he came to his workshop. It was halfway through his workshop year. And he came, and I said, just a couple of thoughts for you. The traps of success are harder to get out of than the traps of failure. And I said, you just had a huge, huge success. So give some thought today. You're here for your workshop. Your last workshop was to get the big sale. And by the way, just as a reference point, he put in his impact filter that there was not going to be any management contract. There was going to be a check, and he was free. So he put that in his
there you go.
thing. And the other thing is there could be no non-compete in the sale.
Right.
And so he had a negotiation with them. They said, well, those two things are unacceptable. We need to have you here, and we don't want you out there competing with us. And he says, well, I guess we don't have a deal. And he walked for 3 days. And then they phoned him up and they say, okay, you can have that. Okay. And it didn't cost him any money.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
And
people they don't believe that it can actually be true. And they don't want to risk someday being free, so they're willing to tie it into, that's part of the purgatory that they have to go to before they get to the heaven of being free, right? Yeah.
And so anyway, I saw him and I said, and then he did the starting over, which was enormously beneficial for him because he said, I was thinking about how am I going to keep myself busy now? And he said, afterwards, he said, it's actually, who am I now going to create with? Which is, which is an amazing, when you think about it, is really an amazing jump. But this move, if we can recontextualize what we've talked about up until now, switching from how to who is actually stripping down.
Yes, it is. Yes, you're right. Because that takes a whole other, all that other layers underneath just the head of it. Because the who is going to come with with a team of who's. Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the way I'm feeling right now. Like there is nothing I'm going to do in the future that's going to involve my thinking about the how.
Yes,
just
I'm over that. Absolutely, that's been the big thing. Is this, and I'm moving now to where I'm fully embracing the Moo method, in every aspect, right? Multiplied oral output in all ways, in directives, in projects, in expressing my ideas, getting my ideas out through talking with a who, rather than, depending on me to go off and fill out some paperwork. That's been a block for me for a lot of years,
Yeah, and the thing is, who I choose as my who's all have the same quality, or they have the same quality, is that by collaborating with these who's, I'm never required to do a how.
That's the truth. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and if I'm required to do a how, then they're not the right who.
And I just love the fact that most of the people that I have this conversation with have money. They have the means to find the who that could save them all of that time. They don't either, for whatever reason, give themselves permission or think that thought. And it's pretty freeing when I see people really get it. At the there was a gentleman that was at the Breakthrough Blueprint that we came with this. We were going. I think
one of my 10 times people at the Breakthrough Booklet.
At the Breakthrough Blueprint this time.
Blueprint, yeah. Come from New York or possibly down from New York or Boston or something like that, Anyway, because he said he was going, and I didn't, and I forgot to pass this on to you. But anyway, he's going to. Yeah.
Okay. So I have had some strategic coach people come, so I don't know who specifically you're talking about, but but this gentleman was from California, and it was really interesting because when you take this idea of creating a scale-ready algorithm that is like taking something to the lowest, unit of what we're actually trying to replicate, right? Like this was a pretty complex thing that he was talking about having to happen that involved people, right? Like there's the most efficient way to do this involves people, but he couldn't see how that would be scalable, right? Because he was thinking at scale first, so willing to accept something that was far less efficient and maybe more expensive because he didn't want to deal with the logistics of how something that required actual people would happen. And I've just been so really thinking this thought of, I think I shared with you the two economies that are really the two worlds that are really happening now. That we've got the cloud, Cloudlandia up here, where everything is really happening. That's where we've all got our heads in the cloud. That's where we're perceiving everything through our phones and our computers, our social networks, and all of that. That's where the actual real world is to a lot of people, or a good portion of their world. And then the mainland, which are the things that are the real, the physical world down below. And I think that there's going to become an even wider gap between the people who like dive right into setting up a life in Cloudlandia or setting up a life on the mainland, and that the real neat thing is going to be realizing serving people in the cloud where everything is easy, exponential, push button, on demand, infinitely possible, and the analog mainland world, and creating a buffer where or an interface, as Peter Diamandis would call it, between organizing mainlanders to allow people to take things that would normally be only possible on the mainland, but let them stay up in the cloud and let them happen. Like I shared that idea of those ghost restaurants that only exist on Grubhub, which is up in the cloud. I want something to eat, which can only happen on the mainland. The physical transfer of the food to my belly can only happen on the mainland. But by everything else about it, I can still keep my head in the cloud and make my choice. I have infinite choices, decide what I want, push a button, and then have somebody just bring it right to me. But that requires the organization of who's on the mainland to make that happen. And I think those are really, there's going to be some tremendous opportunities going forward, organizing who's.
Yeah, but it brings up what I think is an eternal economic model. It's the greatest opportunity and the greatest payoff is always moving back and forth between two worlds.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder historically, what would be that? Like I just started thinking that thought yesterday, actually, trying to think historically, have we been in a transition like that in the past? Okay, so what would be? I knew you would have the answer with your, historical perspective.
I mean, I'll give you, a real easy one to understand. Is the spice trade.
Okay.
The spice trade of intermediaries, mostly, probably in the Asia Minor, so it would be the Eastern Mediterranean, and it would be Turkey, and it would be, what we call the Middle East today. Mm-hmm. They brought spice. They would go further to the east, to India and to the Spice Islands, which are, mm-hmm. There was a first Spice Islands, which was the what we would now call Southeast Asia, Malaysia and Ceylon, which is Sri Lanka now, and mm-hmm. they have tremendous spices. They develop tremendous spices, and Europeans, ate pretty ugly food. If you got mm-hmm. into what we now call mainland Europe, they didn't have spices because first of all, it was too cold. And spices grow in tropical, more semi-tropical. So, I mean, you have to go back. You have to go back 1,000 years to get the middle here. But mm-hmm. having these spices come into Europe, it went viral. That you could have spices with your food, and some of the spices would actually preserve the food because most people were eating. They didn't have means really.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
And they're spices that will actually preserve food, but they give it a much better flavor, And there was a real status attached to the fact that you could serve food with spices, that you had mm-hmm. you had access to spices, and other people don't. And but in order to have access to spices, you had to have a notion of who, not how, because
right.
You couldn't create your own spices. Mm-hmm. Because it required someone who had access to networks of people who traveled back and forth and brought the spices there. And so anywhere, I think anywhere where you have a sudden emergence of a new capability, but it's not accessible to all but a few in the beginning, has the same characteristic as what you're talking now of the distance between the mainland and cloud. What's the name that you call it?
Cloudlandia. Yeah.
Cloudlandia. You know, that the thing is that there's, you know, I always said, you know, your destination shouldn't be heaven or hell, but the courier service in between. That's where all the money is made.
Selling the tickets. Right, exactly.
Yeah. Selling the tickets.
Futures.
You're transporting something that is not available to all back to a place where it's a status issue to have access to this. And you know, I was thinking about this in relationship to this great advantage I have when I go to Toronto Airport, because we have a number of clients who have their own jets, or they have access to jet, you know, fractional ownership of jets. And they say, Dan, you of all person, why are you still flying commercial? And I said, well, you know, the flying is neither here nor there, because I fly business class when I do fly. And, you know, I've been in private jets, and, you know, they're more cramped than the planes that I fly in. And, and I'm usually reading anyway, so I can read in a private jet, or I can read in business class. And I don't notice that my reading is any better one way or the other.
Right, I get it. Yeah.
And I said, my big deal is the
friction.
Is the friction I have to go through.
Yeah.
From the time I leave home until the time the plane's in the air. It's the friction.
Yes.
And about 20 years ago, we were in line. I think the Pope was here in Toronto, and you know, the crowds were out on the street in front of the airliner. It was going to take us 2 hours to get up to the ticket, you know, just to get our ticket.
Yeah.
And this porter from the airport in uniform comes up to us, and he said, would you like to get around all this? And we said, yeah. He says, come with me. He says, don't say anything, just come with me. And he had his cart with him, so he put his our bags on his cart, and he went over to a wall, and there's a doorway there, and he goes through the wall, and we go through corridors, and we come out about 15 feet from the ticket taker, you know, the person who looks at your passport and, you know, puts the tags. And he just stood there, and she looked over at him, and she says, come on up. And we came up. We went right to, you know, we were looking at 2 hours. 5 minutes later, we were through. And then he took us through, you know, in those days, they took you through U.S. Customs and Immigration and everything like that. And then he got us clear and free. So I gave him $50. And he said, anytime you come to the airport, here's my card. He says, just phone ahead. He says, I'll make everything smooth. So for 20 years, he's made our way totally smooth. So much so that there was a huge crowd on November 1st. You know, the Canadians, you know, it hits November 1st, and they go south.
Of course.
Canadians, you know, a third of the population decides to go south on November 1st. And so we called him, you know, and he got there. He was waiting for us at curbside. He had already gotten the baggage tickets. Claims, which I think is a little bit outside the rules. And so he says, just come with me. And we walked up to the ticket person, and he said, show her your passports. And we showed your passports, and she says, good, that's great. She said, I only do this for Eddie. So I've got a who.
Well, Yeah, perhaps while we're dining on next Saturday, we can exchange a piece of paper with the number of this magic worker for my arrival, my trip back on Sunday.
Yes.
That's such a that's such a great thing. I love that.
Yeah, and people say, someone asked me, do you feel badly that you just go ahead of other people? And I said, well, I would feel badly if they went in front of me.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I said, I don't think they'd feel badly if they just got ahead of me. So I says, no,
right.
it's all fair in the friction zone, and if you can find things, and then we have the eye scan. We don't wait in line.
Right.
Normal thing. They take our fingerprints and eye scan, and everything else, and that cuts down on the friction. So, generally speaking, from the moment that we get out of the limousine to the point where we sit down in the apropos section in Air Canada, which are those very nice little restaurants they now have on the concourse. It's 15 minutes. That's not too much of a hassle in the 21st century.
No, exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. This is part of the realization is there's not many situations in life where knowing the right who doesn't make things better.
Yeah, and my feeling is that this is probably, if you you go through the complete spectrum of people who really have it good and people who have it really bad. The only separator, the spectrum from really bad to really good, is the mastery of who.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's some deep.
And it's available to anyone who has the mindset for it. I mean, it has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with anything except mindset. And this porter at the airport is loved. I mean, over a 20-year period. So what I suspect he does, is that I always I pay him 3 times the going rate for a porter, and I have. And it doesn't matter whether it's a busy day or a non-busy day, he gets 3 times the going rate, and we give him, at Christmas time, he gets a big bonus and everything. And my feeling is that he spreads it around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so. That's great. I mean, I'm thinking now, like in everything, when I start thinking about even the, I just had a brand new thought about this what, and then how or who is that. I think just that outward focus again is coming down to what most people think about. Well, what do I want to do? I want to make more money in my business, and they immediately start thinking, well, how can I do that, rather than who do I want to be a hero to?
So it's interesting. I mean, where the zeroing in on procrastination has brought us. First of all, we had a mindset that, hey, there's something really interesting and useful about procrastination. Okay, rather than saying, yeah, I'm really guilty, I'm really guilty about my procrastination. You're really guilty about your procrastination, and therefore we're not going to talk about it. We just did a compact one day. We're saying, hey, let's trade notes on this. Let's actually, and then we've gotten into it. And what have we discovered? I mean, we've discovered all sorts of interesting things.
Absolutely.
And there's a whole series of sub-skills that have come out of this. But the one big one is that the thinking about any future achievement on your part in terms of how will automatically slam you up against procrastination. It will absolutely. And thinking about who will bypass that.
Yeah. And immediately free you up to think even bigger thoughts. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I love it.
I mean, and I don't have to read the depressing columnists in the New York Times anymore.
Well, I can't tell you how much these conversations have been just a delight. I mean, I really enjoy. They go by so fast, but the thinking that it stimulates. I mean, over the last 15 months or whatever have been just tremendous growth in my thinking. So thank you for that.
You know what I'm really grateful for? Looking back, and this is a lawn book, that neither of us really applied ourselves in school.
Right, exactly. Yes, yeah.
We would have developed the wrong mindsets altogether. If we
I think you're absolutely right. We were right.
Yeah, we were right. That's T-shirt material. We were right.
That's so funny.
Okay,
I love it.
I'll see you on Thursday.
Dan. Yes, I can't wait. I will see you Thursday.
Table 10 is already. Table 10
for
is already
sure.
reserved.
Saturday for sure. Yeah. Okay.
The Soren family are eager to see you again.
Okay. Perfect. I love it.
Okay.
I'll see you Thursday, Dan. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.